It always surprises me when people say that they want to hear my stories. But I can see, after everything that's happened, that everyone just wants to know what it was like to actually be there. So today, I'm going to tell you about one particular morning down on the beach. We always went down to the beach with him early in the mornings, those of us who had been walking with him for some time. He liked to be there just as the sun was rising, just as the fishermen were coming back in from his night's work. He makes friends so easily. He likes to walk along the beach and stop at each boat, running his hand along the timber as he takes in the detail. I think if his father had not been a carpenter, he might have liked to have grown up as a fisherman. He talks to the workers, asking after their catch, laughing easily as they celebrate the hugest fish you've ever seen. "Oh, I know," he says, nodding, as if he really does know. He always stops by the women who are cooking right there on the sand. He loves the smell of fish on the fire. He passes them a few small coins and warms his hands as they ready the bread, breaking the fish carefully into pieces. I see him pause as they give it to him while he breathes it in, gives thanks for his meal, and his eyes always close as he takes the first bite. And then he looks again at the women and smiles his thanks in a way that you know they're going to talk about all morning. And then he moves on until we find a spot for us all to sit and listen to his stories. And that day, he was talking again about what the kingdom of heaven is like. I really like listening to him. He's got this way about him, this manner. He's very calm, but he's also strong. I sit up the back, try not to ask too many questions. He spoke to the man sitting in front of me that day, and he said, "Do you understand all these things?" And he said, "Yes." Yes? I thought, but do you though? Do you really? Because his stories seem simple, but I think they're not. I think they call you to great things, very great things, things that are not really possible if you think about it. When he spoke of the kingdom of heaven being like a man planting a tiny mustard seed, I can already see how that's happening. I am nothing. I am small and insignificant, as are many that follow him. We're the ones no one really cares about. Some have promise and might have been good scholars, but most of us are not even noticed. And yet, together, something happens. Not only do people notice us, but they are bothered by us. It's as if we have some kind of power. I can never really tell what that power is, but it's there. The teacher said, the kingdom of heaven is like a small mustard seed that grows into a tree where many birds can build their nest. And I could see what he meant, because I'm here. I have built my nest in this tree that seems to be growing, taking all kinds of shape, building in stature and strength as we move through the villages and listen to his stories. And when he spoke of the yeast, I could tell that he saw me as a woman, not as just another follower. Because when he tells his stories to the crowds, he doesn't only talk about farming and pearl merchants and fishing. He talks about women cleaning, women baking bread, the simplest of tasks. I really liked the story of the yeast. Baking bread was my job at home, and I've naturally fallen into it as we move together as a group with the rabbi. I like to wonder, when Yahweh made the world, how did he come up with the idea of yeast? Did he huddle around a table of potions, smelling and mixing and testing? Did Yahweh experiment with yeast like I have? Did he plan for it, watch the swelling happen, smell the very goodness of it? It's so good. It's got a kind of magic that this tiny amount can be mixed through the flour and set aside, and then with such stillness can swell and expand into a mountain of dough. Have you ever tried to watch it happen? My favourite thing is when you leave it covered and you go to complete other jobs, and all the while you have the anticipation of what you know is happening, hidden in the bowl, under the cloth. And Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed in with 3 measures of flour until all of it was leavened. And I knew what he was getting at because I can see the crowds that are following him swelling in number each day, and I wondered where it might all spread to. Yeast mixed with 3 measures of flour. That's a lot. That's actually too big for any bowl that I've ever seen. And that's how I knew that he wanted us to think big. And I wonder, how far is the kingdom of heaven going to spread? How many people? For how many years? Decades? Maybe centuries? How many will they come to listen, to ponder, come to hear, come to taste, come to see, come to eat the bread that feeds the hungry as they find rest in the branches of the mustard seed tree? Only nights before, as we had eaten the evening meal, Brother Matthew shared with us his thoughts that even the ancient Psalms had spoken of these stories Rabbi Jesus was telling the crowds each day. The scroll says, "Give ear, O my people, to my teaching. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings from of old. We will tell to the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might and the wonders that he has done." Could I be like the mustard seed? Each of us listening on the beach, each of us so small and insignificant, each only one person, and yet there are so many of us that it feels as if the kingdom of heaven could work like this. That each of us could take a tiny part of the hope that the teacher ignites in us and share it, and in turn another does the same. I can see how it might grow like that, expanding out, each insignificant person planting yet another seed until the effect grows and spreads and grows some more, like a small piece of yeast hidden among the flour. It was a long day on the beach that day. The crowds swelled quickly. Some of the locals readied a fishing boat for Jesus to sit in just on the edge of the water, and the height meant that we could all see him, all hear him. And when he spoke the parable of the fishing net, he reached for the net in the boat, and as he stretched out just a small part of it, we could all clearly see what he meant. If he was to throw that net out over all of us as we sat on the beach, we'd all be caught up in it together. All of us, the whole crowd. He'd have filled his net with such a mixture of men and women, even some children, merchants, traders. Some weren't even sitting there to listen to Jesus. They were just working on their fishing pots, getting their tools ready for the next night's work. They would have been caught up in the net, along with the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, who always sat on the edges of the crowd, looking at each other and keeping tabs on how Jesus was reinventing aspects of the ancient scrolls for his own purposes. If Jesus had thrown the net from the boat in that very moment, we all would have been caught up in it together. And he said that that is what the kingdom of God is like. Right now, we're all in it together. At the end of the age, some of us will be kept and others will be thrown away. But right now, we're all caught up in the net together. Listening to him has made me question nearly everything. As a young girl, I loved the certainty of the scrolls and the rabbis. The teachers debated and argued, but they taught us clearly that the words of the scrolls held the words of life for our people, and I believed it. It's very different when this rabbi of Nazareth speaks. He makes the Pharisees furious. But when I listen, my heart burns within me in a way that it never did before. There's a new teaching here about the wind and the spirit and new birth. And when this gentle and kind teacher speaks of angels coming to cast some of us into eternal flames, well, I wonder what that is, what that all means. But it just makes me desperately want to keep listening, because I believe this teacher to be the promised one who was to come. I really do. I think the whispers were correct. It seems incongruous. He's such a simple man, just a carpenter. But there's a rumble, there's a power. All those great miracles he did all across Galilee, there's a swelling up. And I can feel that the angels might indeed be coming, and a shaking of the ground might happen, and somehow this man speaking will defeat the powers of this world and bring justice. But I imagine this to be more beautiful than horrifying, because I trust him. I trust how he will do it. I trust him because he said things like, if anyone gives a cup of cold water to one of those little ones because they are my disciple, I tell you the truth, he will certainly not lose his reward. The who is my neighbour story, that's also a good one. It's not enough for me to simply buy the field or own the treasure or to simply be caught up in the net. I'd have to ignore what he said next about the end of the age being a time of reckoning. And he didn't say it just once. I've heard him say it before, with the birds and the thorns sown into the field. I've heard him say it with the wheat growing side by side with the weeds. It is something to be part of a mustard seed movement, but what does it matter if you carefully build a huge and comfortable nest right in the centre of the old growth part of the mustard seed tree, just to be cast into flames at the end of the age? I don't know the answer to this today, but I do know this one thing. I want to keep listening to Jesus. In this moment today, listening to him is the only thing that makes any sense to me. It lifts my heart, it opens my eyes to new ways. It forces me to wrestle with uncomfortable truths. And I've learned over time that I will feel exactly like this again tomorrow and the day after that. Because if God is Jesus-like, and if Jesus' stories reveal the mysteries of the kingdom of God, then my only choice is to keep listening Brother Simon always talks about the very first time when Jesus told him and Andrew to drop their nets and to follow him, and that he would teach them to become fishers of men. It seems such a strange thing to say, but I can see exactly what he meant. I can see it happening. Every time we tell people the stories, every time we remember just one of those mornings with Jesus and we go back into the moment and we tell it just like it happened, people want to hear more. So we tell as many stories as we can remember, and we keep on telling them, and more people get caught up in the telling, and it's like the nets keep spreading far and wide. And like me, and like everyone who's heard the stories so far, through the telling, you are now caught up in the story too. And you'll tell someone what you've heard, and they'll tell someone, and then you'll be a fisher of people. And that's how it happens. That's what the kingdom of heaven is like.